Our anniversary landed on a Thursday that year. I remember because I'd circled it in red ink on the kitchen calendar months in advance. Rachel had laughed when she caught me doing it. "You're such a sentimentalist," she said, ruffling my hair like I was a puppy. I grinned back and shrugged, pretending not to notice the way her phone lit up with a name I didn't recognize. She turned it face down and the moment passed. The plan was simple. I booked a reservation at La Fontana, a quiet little Italian place on the outskirts of Seattle, the kind of spot that felt like it was meant for secrets and soft confessions. It wasn't trendy. No fusion tapas, no digital menus, no Instagram wall. Just warm lighting, wine-stained tablecloths, and the scent of garlic that wrapped around you like a memory. Rachel used to love places like that. I arrived a little early, like I always do. I wore the navy button-down she once told me brought out my eyes. Not that I expected her to notice. I remember the hostess smiled when I mentioned we were celebrating 10 years. "That's beautiful," she said, leading me to a candlelit corner table by the window. "We don't see a lot of people who still do this." I ordered a bottle of red and waited. 20 minutes passed. I checked my phone, no text, no call. I sent a quick message. "Everything okay? Just checking." No response. 40 minutes. The wine sat untouched. The waiter came by and offered bread. I declined. I didn't want it to look like I'd come here to eat alone. I kept refreshing my messages, telling myself traffic in the city could be brutal, that maybe she got caught up at work, or stopped to pick up flowers, or maybe she was planning something and this was just part of it. Maybe. An hour and a half in, I flagged down the waiter to ask if the kitchen was closing soon. He looked at me like he wanted to say something comforting, but didn't know what would help. I was folding and unfolding my napkin when the door opened again, and I saw her. Rachel. She walked in like she owned the place. Not harried, not rushed, just collected. Her coat was draped over one arm, her phone in the other. She wore a slim black dress I'd never seen before, a little too elegant for late at work, and right beside her was a man in a fitted button-up, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Clean-shaven, confident, not work-friend energy. They didn't see me. They were led to a table across the room, tucked behind a wide column. I leaned forward enough to peek without being obvious. She laughed at something he said, head tilted, hand lightly touching his wrist. I had seen that expression before, that posture, that kind of laugh. It used to be mine. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I walked across the room, half expecting her to look up and beam, to jump up and say, "Surprise! Happy anniversary!" Some wild twist where I was the fool for doubting. But the look on her face stopped me cold. She froze for just a breath, then smiled. But not the kind that comes from warmth. It was mechanical, a smirk made of tension and calculation. "Oh, hey," she said. "This is David. He's just a colleague. I totally forgot today. Just a colleague." She didn't even stand up. She didn't introduce me properly, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Just sat there, calm as anything, like I was the one interrupting her evening. I stared at her, then at him. He gave me this polite half-nod, like we were strangers bumping into each other at a grocery store, not a husband and the man my wife had clearly chosen to spend our anniversary with. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust myself to. I turned and walked out. The night air was sharp and dry, slicing through the heat rising in my chest. My heart didn't pound. It just sank, like an anchor finally hitting the ocean floor after years of drifting. I stood by my car, hands clenched into fists in my coat pockets. A part of me wanted to go back in, to flip the table, to ask her how dare you. But the other part, the quieter one, the part that had grown used to the late nights and missed calls, just nodded in silence. This wasn't a surprise. Not really. It was just the moment the truth stopped pretending to wear a disguise. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard. A little yellow sticky note fluttered by the gearshift. Rachel had written it weeks ago. "Don't forget to pick up milk. Love you." I used to smile every time I saw it. Now it felt like a joke. I thought about driving home. But home didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a story I had told myself too many times. So I just sat there, Car off, hands on the wheel, trying to remember the last time I had looked at her and felt certain. Couldn't. The truth wasn't that she forgot our anniversary. It was that she stopped seeing me altogether, and I had been too blind or maybe too hopeful to admit it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with a blanket that smelled like fabric softener and static, not comfort. The ceiling fan clicked with every rotation, an off-rhythm beat that sounded like a countdown to something I couldn't name. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared. And my mind, like it had been waiting for permission, opened the floodgates. Everything I hadn't questioned suddenly felt suspect. All the little oddities brushed away like dust. The working late texts that came with no context. The nights she declined calls in front of me, screen lighting her face like a secret. The way her showers grew longer, later steam billowing under the door at midnight. The new perfume. She never wore perfume. Then suddenly it was this sharp, expensive scent that lingered on the pillows and made me sneeze. I asked once, trying something new, and she smiled, distracted, got it from a coworker. Sample thing. She never wore it when we were together. Only when she went out. I remembered the first time her phone was locked. We used to share everything, even passcodes. Not because we were suspicious, but because we didn't have anything to hide. One day, I grabbed her phone to silence an alarm while she was in the shower. It asked for a code. I thought it was a glitch. She laughed it off. Just started locking it for work privacy. Company stuff. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Then there were the nights she went out with her friends and came back with that same unfamiliar scent on her clothes, not the perfume, but something else. Masculine. Not cologne exactly, just someone. I told myself it was smoke from the bar, or the leather in the rideshare, or someone she hugged goodbye. I remembered one time she was late getting home and I offered to heat up leftovers. She brushed past me, said she wasn't hungry. Then I noticed her makeup was perfect, untouched. Not a single smudge even after a long day. I joked about it. She smiled and said, maybe I'm just magical. I smiled back. Like an idiot. One night, maybe 5 months ago, I found 2 movie tickets in the side pocket of her purse. She said she went alone. Needed a solo night, she told me, sipping tea and folding laundry like nothing happened. I should have questioned her harder. I didn't. And now? Now it all played like a montage in my head, each moment a thread I'd ignored, and now they were knotting around my throat. You know how sometimes you wake up from a dream and can't remember it, but the feeling clings to you all day? That's what it felt like. Except now, the dream was my marriage. The feeling? Dread. I kept going back to a night 6 weeks ago, a Friday. She came home later than usual, said her meeting ran long. She looked off. Her mascara had bled just a little under one eye. I asked if everything was okay. She said she was just tired. Long week. She hugged me that night, the way someone hugs a friend they're saying goodbye to but don't want to explain why. It was the kind of hug you remember after everything falls apart. I started noticing things around the house too. Little changes. Her side of the closet grew emptier, slowly, deliberately. Not enough to alarm, just enough to shift the weight. Her favorite sweater disappeared. I found it later, weeks later, folded in the back seat of her car. Oh, she said. I brought it to work one day. Forgot. That word was becoming her shield. I sat in the kitchen the next morning, the same table where we used to sit with Sunday coffee and crossword puzzles. I held her mug, the one that said "but first," coffee in chipped gold letters. I hadn't seen her use it in weeks. Instead, she started drinking from travel mugs, always on the go. Never staying long enough to finish a full cup at home. That day, I stared at the wall for a long time. The photo of us in Florence, her arm draped around my shoulder, our smiles sunburnt and stupid with love. I remembered that trip. I remembered how she kissed my cheek while I tried to figure out the map. I remembered how she laughed when I botched the Italian ordering pasta. But now, I couldn't tell if that version of her had ever been real. Or if she had just been good at pretending. That morning, I scrolled through our messages. The pasture looked like 2 strangers trying to keep a balloon afloat with distant, polite taps. Her last few texts were efficient. Clinical. Meeting at 6, might be late. Don't forget to grab eggs. Can you sign the package from UPS? Nothing tender. Nothing in asterisk, mate. Just logistics. Like roommates. Like colleagues. I used to think love faded slowly, like a sunset. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe it didn't fade at all. Maybe it snapped, a cord stretched too tight for too long. And maybe by the time you hear it break, it's already been broken for months. I remember Rachel once told me she hated silence. It makes me feel like something's wrong, she said. Now I realized she'd filled our house with sound, music, TV, voice notes, not because she loved noise, but because silence had started to speak the truth. And the truth was, she wasn't here. Not really. Not for a long time. But I had been. I had been the one checking in. The one booking the dinners. The one staying up to make sure she got home okay. The one sending "miss you" texts that went unanswered or came back with a dry, distracted heart emoji. It's funny, the things you tolerate when you think love is supposed to be hard work. You excuse the distance. You chalk up their irritability to stress. You tell yourself they'll come back to you when the storm passes. What you don't realize is sometimes they've already gone. They're just waiting for you to figure it out so they don't have to be the one to leave. And when they finally do, they'll say something like, "I didn't know how to tell you," or "it just kind of happened." As if betrayal is something that slips, not something that steps. I sat there until the sun was high in the sky, the light spilling across the floor like it was trying to wash everything clean. But some stains don't fade with daylight. Some memories, once harmless, come back wearing sharper teeth. 2 days passed. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. She came home late both nights. First time, said she had to stop by a coworker's birthday gathering. The second, she didn't offer an excuse at all. Just kicked off her shoes, poured herself a glass of wine, and disappeared into the guest room where she had started sleeping a few weeks back, claiming my snoring had gotten intolerable. I could feel the distance now like a physical presence. It sat between us at breakfast, curled up in the corners of the living room, and followed her every time she left without a word. And then came the message. I was parked outside a grocery store, half pretending to check my shopping list, half just trying to delay going back home, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something about the preview, a photo attachment, made me tap it open. There she was. Rachel. In the frame, she was walking out of a place called Pine Hill Inn. It wasn't exactly a hotel, more like a secluded roadside stop, the kind you rent by the hour if you don't want anyone asking questions. She was laughing. Laughing. The kind of laugh you only do when you're light, carefree, caught up in someone you trust. The man next to her? Same one from the restaurant. He had one hand on her waist, the other swinging casually like this was just another sunny day. Her hair was a little windblown. Her jacket was unzipped. They looked comfortable. An asterisk mate. Familiar. The timestamp? The night before. The night she said she had a team presentation she couldn't reschedule. I didn't breathe. I just stared. My mind didn't race, it stopped, like it needed time to rewire. The photo didn't just sting. It confirmed everything. This wasn't a flotation. This wasn't uncertainty. This was intentional. Calculated. Lived in. I should have called her right then. Confronted her. Sent the picture back with a question mark or a wow or maybe just the word why. But I didn't. I couldn't. I sat there in my car for nearly an hour, engine off, phone in my lap, the image burned into my retinas like some kind of brand. My mouth was dry. My limbs were heavy. I felt detached from myself, like I was floating 2 feet behind my own body. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe longer than I should admit. But something inside me shifted that day. It was like my heart had been screaming in a soundproof room for months and now suddenly the door was wide open. When I finally moved, I didn't go home. I drove nowhere in particular. Ended up at a quiet park Rachel and I used to visit during the first year of our marriage. I remember we once had a picnic there under a sycamore tree. I spilled orange juice on her dress and she laughed like I'd told the funniest joke in the world. This time, the only sound was the wind rattling the bare branches. I sat on the same bench. Looked out at the pond. I tried to cry, but I couldn't. The tears were gone, used up by years of hoping, apologizing, compromising. All I had left was numbness. That photo didn't just expose an affair. It ended something. It was a funeral in pixels. A death certificate for a life I'd spent 10 years building. I wanted to believe there was still something salvageable beneath the wreckage, some part of her that still felt tied to me. But no. You don't check into a motel with another man on your anniversary week unless you've already buried the relationship and moved on. I went home that night, phone face down on the counter, and just sat in the dark. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was accusing. And yet, part of me was relieved, not by the betrayal, but by the certainty. I no longer had to wonder. I didn't have to invent scenarios where she was loyal but misunderstood, tired but faithful. The fantasy had expired. Now I had the truth. Ugly. Unforgiving. But honest. The next morning I printed the photo. Not for drama. Not to wave it in her face. Just to hold it. To see it on paper. To feel its weight. It sat on the dining table while I made coffee. It sat there while I stared out the window, listening to the hum of a city that didn't care my marriage had just collapsed. It sat there like a verdict, and for once I didn't try to argue with it. Later that day, she texted me. "Dinner tonight? I'll be back early." I didn't respond. What could I say? Can't. Busy processing the fact you've been sleeping with another man while I was planning a surprise weekend getaway? Instead, I deleted the message. But I didn't delete the photo. I kept it. Not because I wanted to keep hurting, but because I didn't want to forget what it felt like when the curtain finally dropped. When the lies ran out. When the person you loved the most proved they had already written you out of their future long before you realized the script had changed. The next evening, I came home just after 7. The sky was already dark and the streetlights glowed through a misty drizzle that had started hours earlier and never quite stopped. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Rachel through the kitchen window, sitting at the table, sipping from a mug like it was any normal night. As if the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. I stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon, a candle she lit whenever she wanted to play cozy. It used to be something I loved. Now it just felt like camouflage. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Hey," she said casually. "Want some tea?" I just made a pot. I stood there for a second, the photo now folded neatly in my coat pocket, practically burning against my side. My heart wasn't pounding. It was still. Focused. I walked into the kitchen, pulled the folded picture from my pocket and slid it across the table to her. She glanced down at it, sipped her tea, then finally picked it up. She didn't ask what it was. She knew. Her eyes scanned it for half a second before she set it back down, not with fear, not with guilt. With annoyance. Then she looked at me. And said, "So you're spying on me now? That's pathetic." I don't know what I expected. An apology, maybe? Shock. At the very least, a crack in the mask. But she didn't flinch. No gasp. No denial. Just deflection. Like I was the problem. Like her being caught cheating wasn't the issue, it was me daring to find out. I didn't say anything. I just stared. She set her mug down and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You know," she said, "if you'd paid half this much attention while we were actually together, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." That hit hard. Not because it was true, but because it was practiced. I'd heard the same sentiment echoed by people trying to justify the inexcusable. And now here it was, coming from my own wife. She looked away, almost bored. "You've been nothing to me for a long time," she said flatly. Dull. Gray. Like living in a waiting room. I just wanted to feel alive. I couldn't even respond at first. Not out of shock, but out of exhaustion. There was nothing left to defend. No marriage left to fight for. "I was faithful," I said finally, voice low. "I showed up. I stayed. Even when you didn't." She rolled her eyes. "Yeah. You were there. Congrats. You showed up physically. But emotionally? You checked out years ago." I opened my mouth to argue, but stopped. Because that's how people like Rachel win. They twist the narrative until they're the victim. And you're too busy defending your character to remember what really happened. She stood up, collected her mug, and rinsed it in the sink like we just had a minor disagreement over what to watch on Netflix. Not like we were standing in the ashes of our marriage. I watched her for a moment. "You don't feel anything?" I asked. "Not even a little guilt?" She looked over her shoulder and smirked. "Why would I? You never made me feel like I mattered." "David did. That's the difference." "David." She finally said his name. I let that hang in the air for a beat. I wanted to say so many things. About loyalty. About vows. About how David was never supposed to be in this house, not even in the atmosphere of our lives. But I didn't. Because she didn't care. There would be no regret. No apology. No late-night sobbing where she admitted she'd made a mistake. Just contempt. Just coldness. Just blame, launched like arrows from behind that same tired excuse. I needed more. What she really needed was attention without accountability. Love without effort. Excitement without loyalty. "You think you're the hero in this story," I said quietly. "You're not." She turned off the faucet. Dried her hands. "You think being boring makes you noble," she said. "But it just made you easy to leave." I stepped back from the doorway. The weight of her words didn't hurt the way I thought they might. They didn't pierce me, they clarified everything. This wasn't about me failing as a husband. It was about her running from herself. People like her don't seek connection. They seek escape. And when the consequences catch up, they burn the whole bridge behind them so no one else can follow. "I want you out by the end of the week," I said, calm but firm. She raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's how we're doing this?" "No," I said, "you did this." "I'm just responding." She didn't argue. She just laughed under her breath, this bitter little sound like I'd amused her, and walked past me without a word. Later that night, she texted me from the guest room. "We should talk when you calm down." I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't angry. I was done. It was 4 days later when the envelope arrived. No knock on the door. No warning. Just a plain manila folder slid through the mail slot with my name typed neatly across the front. I picked it up without thinking, still holding my morning coffee, and stared at the label like maybe it was a mistake. A misdelivery. It wasn't. Inside were divorce papers. Filed by Rachel. The reason she gave? Emotional pressure and detachment. I sat down at the dining table, the one where we used to eat takeout and laugh about our terrible cooking attempts, and read through the whole thing twice. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I couldn't quite believe how easy it was for her to reduce our 10-year marriage into checkbox categories and legal jargon. She hadn't just walked out emotionally. She'd planned her exit. Clean. Cold. Strategic. I didn't fight it. I didn't beg or call or send some long, desperate message. I didn't tell her how cruel it felt to be discarded and then blamed for the damage she caused. I didn't bother asking for the house or the car or even the dog Max, who had started sleeping at the foot of the guest bed ever since she moved in there like it was her own studio apartment. Let her have it all. What was I holding on to anyway? The furniture we picked out when we were still pretending to be in sync? The kitchen where she said "I love you" for the last time without looking up from her phone? The bed she no longer shared? I signed the papers the next day. No drama. No conditions. It was the most clarity I'd felt in weeks. The silence that followed was strange. Not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that hums with tension, but the stillness of something that's already collapsed. The ruin after the wreck. When you walk through a place you used to love and realize it's just a building now. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend of mine. Someone who didn't know all the details yet, just that Rachel and I were taking time apart. "Hey, saw Rachel at Hanover's Jewelers. She was with that guy. They were looking at rings." I read it 3 times. Rings. Less than 2 weeks since she filed. There was no typo. No joke. No misunderstanding. She was shopping for wedding bands with the man she used to call just a colleague while our divorce papers were still warm from the printer. I didn't reply. I didn't even feel shocked. I just stared at the message and all I could think was, of course she is. Of course it had been going on longer than she admitted. Of course it was serious. You don't move that fast unless the engine's been running under the hood for months, maybe longer. It wasn't a betrayal anymore. It was a campaign. A slow withdrawal from our marriage while simultaneously constructing a new life on top of the old one, like building a mansion on top of ruins. The day she moved out, I wasn't even home. I made sure of it. She didn't tell me where she was going, didn't need to. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Let David have her. Let him figure out what it's like to live with someone who twists the truth like it's origami, always folding, never unfolding. When I got back that night, her stuff was gone. Drawers empty. Closet cleared. All that remained were the echoes, the outline of her side of the bed, the dust patterns where her picture frames used to sit, the faint, ghostly scent of her perfume lingering like the memory of someone who had long since left. I stood in the hallway for a while, not really thinking. Just being. And that's when it hit me, not relief, not sadness, but something stranger. Emptiness. Not the dramatic kind either. Just a clean slate. The kind of emptiness that's not asking to be filled, just acknowledged. There was no more pretending. No more waiting for her to come home late with another lie tucked behind her teeth. No more quiet dinners or fake apologies. No more wondering whether the person across from me still loved me, or if I was just a placeholder until her new life was ready. I was free, technically, but it didn't feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing in the wreckage of something that once had meaning, and realizing the meaning wasn't mutual. The next morning, I started packing my own things. I didn't want the house. I didn't want a shrine to a life that no longer existed. Every drawer, every photo, every mug reminded me of her, of us, of the promises we made on a beach in Oregon, barefoot and sunburned, when we thought love alone could carry us through anything. Turns out, love isn't always the thing that keeps people together. Sometimes it's just the last thing to leave. I boxed up my clothes, my books, a few framed photos of my family. Everything else. The couch we picked out on a Sunday afternoon, the dishes from our wedding registry, the art prints she insisted on buying even though I hated them, I left behind. Let her keep the illusion. Let her build her new life in the shell of the one she burned down. The break didn't happen in a fight. There were no slam doors, no screaming matches, no final words carved from anger or heartbreak. It just ended, quietly, like a song fading out, and somehow that made it hurt more. I moved into a small apartment on the north side of the city, the kind of place that smelled faintly of paint and old radiator heat. The floors creaked, and the walls were thin, but it was mine. No shared closet. No ghost of perfume lingering in the hallway. No second toothbrush next to the sink. Just silence, and for once I welcomed it. The first night I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed her, but because I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I had grown so used to tension, to noise, to walking on eggshells. Now there were no eggshells. Just hardwood floors and too many memories. I boxed up anything that reminded me of Rachel. Photos, keepsakes, even that stupid electric kettle she loved. Gone. I needed space to breathe, and reminders of her felt like smoke in my lungs. Old friends started reaching out. Heard what happened. You okay? I gave short answers. Most of them didn't need the details. Some just wanted gossip. I wasn't ready to give either. At night I walked. No direction. Just moving, just thinking. It helped somehow, like shedding something with every block. I started remembering who I was before her. Before the lies, before I started shrinking just to keep the peace. I wasn't there yet. But I was on my way. 2 months passed. I saw her by accident at a shopping center of all places. She was with another man. Not David. Someone new. Younger. Confident. She laughed at something he said, holding his hand the way she used to hold mine when we still believed in each other. She saw me. Our eyes met. She didn't flinch. Didn't wave. Didn't even look away. Just kept walking like I was a chapter she'd already finished. And you know what? I let her. I didn't stop. Didn't say a word. Just kept walking in the opposite direction. Later, standing in the cold air outside the store, I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pain. Not anger. Not sadness. Just lightness. Like she'd finally let go of the last piece of me she was still holding on to. I was finally free.